Hi readers, welcome back to another Natasha Preston review. I have my dog with me and he is sleepy, but he is here wanting attention and wanting to be the star of the video. Anyway, today I'm going to be reviewing The Dare. I actually finished reading this in 2024, but I'm only getting around to recording the review now. Along with two of her other books that I finished in 2024, and then there's also one that I finished this year, but haven't reviewed yet. So, this is The Dare. This is a really interesting book out of the rest of hers because it is very different. In most of her books, the premise is the protagonist is in a situation where people are getting murdered, people have been murdered, something is happening, murder mystery stuff, and they have to try and figure out who it is and not die. This one is very different because the protagonists are the ones who do something, and the protagonists also are the ones hiding it. So the reader knows the secret the full time, or basically since it happens, which isn't quite at the beginning, but yeah, the reader knows, the reader's in on it. It's the other people in town who aren't. And it's very, very interesting. It's also really interesting because the ending of this one left me super conflicted, because in a lot of the endings of her books, the ending is someone is dying, someone has been killed, all these different things where it's like really, really bad cliffhangers where it's like you don't even know who's still alive or not. Cosmos is taking up all the chair. But this one is really different. There is still death and stuff like that, but it's done in a different way. And at the end, it's a little bit conflicting because it's like, do I actually want this person to succeed or not? So I'm trying to be really careful with how I word that because it could very easily become a spoiler. But it's such an interesting difference between what's going on in this book and all of her other books. It's also just a very different sort of mood because the fear that's happening is the thing being found out rather than like someone's after us kind of thing. So it's definitely really, really, really interesting because it is not like any of her other books, which is kind of cool. Like, it's nice that she isn't just writing kind of the same thing over and over. This one is very different. And there were a lot of times where I was like, I kind of knew whose side I was on. And then at the end, I'm not sure, which is why I'm left feeling so conflicted about it. But basically, the premise is that seniors in high school have to do a prank or a dare given to them by this one guy who kind of like rules the school a little bit, and he gives them this dare and something happens while they're doing it, and I'm not gonna say what it is, but it's not a good thing that happens, and they make a pact, like, we're never gonna speak of this, no one's gonna know that this happened, and so they go on trying to be normal about everything and pretend it didn't happen when it did, and all of the different people react differently. Like, some are like, oh yeah, it didn't happen, like, acting completely normal, and then the protagonist is kind of, like, struggling with the fact that it did happen, and it's just a really interesting book, because they're trying so hard to, like, keep it a secret and not let anyone find out what happened, and that makes it so different than the rest of her books that I've read. But it's also just so interesting because it kind of is almost like I need to be so careful not to give away too much, but, like, the characters, some of them that you start out hating, kind of get a little bit of a redemption, and then the other characters that you start out being on their side, you kind of stop feeling that way after some of their behavior comes out. And that's why the end is so confusing to me, because it's like, I'm conflicted on whether I should be happy for this character or not, because I kind of am not. Like, it's a very dramatic ending. It's not quite a cliffhanger in the same way that some of her other books are, where it ends with the person, like, in the hands of the murderer or something like that. It ends kind of with them escaping the whole situation, but it's, like, it's weird, and it's not necessarily how I wish the characters had gone about it, because now I'm like, that was kind of a sucky thing to do. Like, I kind of am not on their side anymore. I'm not saying which characters, because I don't want to give away too much for anyone who wants to read this, but it is definitely a different approach to the sort of murder mystery, because it's like, they know what happens, and it's the whole drama is the keeping of the secret, not the finding out of the answer, which makes it a lot more interesting for the reader, I guess, because you're kind of conflicted of, like, well, I know who is responsible, but I also, like, I don't know, like, do I want them to get away with it, or do I not? Like, how do I feel about this? Because, like, they are the protagonists, but also, like, they did this, and one of them you can kind of tell is, like, dealing with it worse than some of the others, and it's a very interesting book. I feel like it also makes me happy that I didn't have a senior year of high school, and that I didn't have to deal with, like, senior prank or senior dare or anything like that, because I feel like people still do that, and it's a lot of times kind of stupid. So it's definitely a really interesting, I feel like a lot of her books, particularly this one and The Fear, have a lot of interesting sort of social commentary about high schoolers, and in The Fear it's a lot more about, like, social media safety, and how if you post what you do on social media every day of the entire week. People will learn your schedule, they'll know where you'll be, they'll figure it out, and then they will just be able to hunt you down. And how, like, a social media trend can be unsafe, which I think is something that is a genuine thing that happens, like, not to necessarily the level that it's happening in that book, but it's very interesting how, this one, too, is, like, sometimes pranks aren't harmless. Sometimes they're not just like, oh yeah, fun dare. It's like, you have to be aware that what you're doing is dangerous and putting other people at risk. And if you do it for, like, social clout, like, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. And, like, the character, one of them doesn't even want to do it. Like, it's very interesting, and it also is interesting how the social dynamic of the friend group changes after the thing happens, because it's like they're all sharing this secret together, but then one of them gets super suspicious that the other's gonna, like, leak it, and all this stuff. It's, like, very, very, very interesting. It's really hard to talk about it without giving spoilers, because, again, you kind of know everything, rather than waiting for it to be found out. So the main part of the book is, like, the big plot twist, I guess. Well, there still is a plot twist. There's, like, 4 plot twists at the end, but it's definitely, I enjoyed it. Also, like I mentioned in another, there's always a flower in the titles of these books. This is this one. It's maybe a rose? It isn't quite a rose. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But, it is, I like the cover design for this one, too. Because I feel like it kind of gives away a bit of it. But, it's more of like a once you know what it is, you see it in the cover. But it's very, very interesting. I kind of enjoy the way that the ending is conflicting. I mean, a lot of her books at the end, I'm mad about them. I'm like, how could she think that that's a good way to end this? That's not an ending. It sucks. And even though the book as a whole is, like, addicting, Natasha Preston is unhealthy for me. I get so upset after almost all her books, but I still can't stop reading them because they are addicting and it's unhealthy. To the point, I have this thing where I have struggled in school for a long time. I am autistic. I am a person with ADHD. School is not the easiest for me. And so for every class I pass at the end of every quarter, I get to buy a book or a puzzle for each class as, like, a reward for passing it. And one of mine that I did for my fall class last December was I bought another one of her books, and it's like, I could have bought so many other books by authors that I know aren't going to upset me so much, but I needed it, so it's a little bit unhealthy. But I think that this one is the only one that I'm left feeling really conflicted about, because the others, it's like, how dare you write that as the end, or for 2 of them now, it's like, I can kind of make that work. Like, that, I feel like there is a way that I can justify that ending, which I will be talking about a little bit more in my review of The Twin, which will be coming soon-ish, probably, because that one is one where the ending itself I didn't like very much, but I, like, wrote myself a new chapter in my head that I was like, that fixes it. This one, I just don't know how to feel. I don't really agree with the way the characters did it, but then I also don't particularly like the other character. They did something too, but then he also didn't deserve this, and then that other character really didn't deserve what happened to her, and then the main character, do I? I don't know. It's hard to talk about without giving spoilers, but it's like so much more uncertain about my own feelings about it than any of the others that I've read by her, because I kind of was like that from the beginning, where I'm like, is it right that they're getting away with this? Like, shouldn't they have said that they did it? And like, they just keep making themselves deeper in the pit of what they've done, and to the point where they can't really go back anymore. And yeah, it's a little different, but I enjoyed it. Mostly. It was conflicting. It was also addicting. I could not put it down. But it was kind of refreshing after the others, where they all ended differently, because they ended the way that it fit based on what the book was, but they ended in a way where it was like, yep, the murderer has them, the murderer killed them, the murderer is behind them. Like, that's kind of how a lot of them end, is like these really intense cliffhangers, and this one is not really that. It's also not really a cliffhanger. Actually, wait a minute. I don't think it's exactly a cliffhanger. It's, it's a little bit more. I'm trying to find where this book actually ends, because it's got a preview for another of hers at the end. But this is not a cliffhanger. I just realized that. Like, it kind of is. It's like a little bit abrupt, but it's like not a cliffhanger in the way that the others have been. Also, another thing that's interesting about this one is that this one actually has at the end a Q&A with the author, and then a playlist of songs that go with the book. There are 2 by Taylor Swift. I don't enjoy Taylor Swift, and I know everyone online is going to come for me now. Also, I share my last name with her. I'm not related to her, and I'm happy about it. But when I was in elementary school, everyone's like, is she your mom? Is she your sister? And it's like, no, not at all. But that is something that I don't think the other books have. I think it's interesting that there's a playlist with it. But I kind of get it, because when I write my novels, a lot of the time I do have music in the background. Not often lyric pop songs, though. I have a lot more, like, epic instrumental type music, which is very fun to write, too. But yeah, this book, I do recommend it, but I'm also conflicted about it. And I think it probably is a book that people who enjoy murder mysteries would enjoy, even though it's not exactly a murder mystery. It's still kind of thriller, but the murder mystery part is a little bit taken out of it. Because it isn't even really a mystery. I mean, it is kind of like a how are they gonna get away with it kind of mystery, but it's not like a who did it kind of mystery. But it's fine. I liked it, but I also kind of feel really conflicted about it. Because I feel like often you're supposed to like the protagonist, and I don't necessarily like how the protagonist did some stuff. And I also don't really like how some of the other characters that are other protagonists or friends of the protagonist did some stuff. I feel like some people get screwed over, some people die, some people, stuff happens. But yeah, as far as Natasha Preston books go, this one is very interesting. The ending isn't one that makes you really angry in the same way that the others do. You might be angry at the characters, but it's less like, how could you as an author think this is a good ending point? It does feel like an ending point, which I think some of her books are lacking that a little bit. They end on cliffhangers and she knows exactly what she's doing. But this one ends on like a, this makes sense, this is the end kind of point, which is not something all her books have. I think that if you've read a lot of her other books and find them a little bit repetitive with the same sort of like, this character gets murdered and now the other characters are trying to figure out who it is and all that, this one is definitely very refreshing because it is very different. And I would be really interested to see what other people think about it, like whether or not they're conflicted about it, because for me personally, it is conflicting. I don't know how to feel about this book and this character at the end. It's like, okay. I mean, I can see why, but also, I don't know. So I'm really curious if you read this book. Let me know. Try to be mindful of spoilers, but I am very curious what other people think of this book. Let me know what you're reading this year. I'd love to hear that, and let me know if you have any recommendations too, because I recently reviewed A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which is one that was recommended to me to review, so I probably wouldn't have read it without that, and it's very good. It's very interesting. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and keep reading. Bye!